Welcome to She Blaze, where we're bringing you cannabis culture from a woman's point of view. And as always, here to elevate the cannabis industry. I'm one of your hosts, Ice Dawson, Cannabis Socialite.
And I am Dasheeda Dawson, the WeedHead.
Hey, WeedHead.
Hey, girl.
On today's episode of She Blaze, we're introducing you to our Cannabis Deep Dive series, where we're taking a microscope to legalization and regulation, state by state in America. We're kicking things off with Maine.
Okay, well, that is going to be exciting. Of course, we have to start the show with our high of the week, and I'm gonna pass the mic to you right quick and talk to us about what your high of the week is.
Right now, I'm smoking on some gelato, which is a culture favorite. I mean, shout out to Young Dolph. He really changed the game of strains when he created his gelato song, and then everybody else started talking about gelato, and it really just became a culture phenomenon. So that's what I'm smoking on right now. Pretty classic sativa hybrid. You know, there's so many phenotypes off of gelato that sometimes I'm like, is that gelato cake? But we just gonna leave that alone.
You are kicking a lot of terms around and definitely showing that you are clearly a conscious cannabis user. And of course, at some point, we probably need to do a deep dive into cannabis shopping and terms and things like that, because between all of your concentrates and the different types and all of the different strains or cultivar names, and like you said, phenotypes is what does it look like, right? Not necessarily what it's supposed to be as its genotype, the genetics, but what does it actually look like and what does it mix with? And yeah, I'm sure people are like, what? But it is real science.
It is real science, and you know, you can't get away with not talking about a hot topic either.
Oh, of course I have a high of the week. My high of the week is actually the fact that we kicked off our May cohort of our online course, Intro to Cannabis Business. It is doing well. I mean, 5 cohorts in. We have had our ups and downs because of COVID, of course. And I want to shout out everybody that has kind of stuck with us. Continue to give your feedback. I take it so seriously. But this course, y'all, it's only $50. We dropped it down from $100 to $50. You get a free ebook, and people get to learn about getting into the cannabis industry, crossing over their skills as a professional, and using what they currently have in the industry. But it is grounded in that real science. So you will learn about all the different ways that we can cultivate cannabis and what is called, what scientific, group is under. It's just, you know, I'm proud of what we've done so far. We will continue to improve as we look at the back half of the year. But that's my high of the week, which of course is fitting because we are going to be sliding into the fact that cannabis education is one of the fastest sectors growing in the industry, especially now that we are basically online only. And so I wanted to just start the hot topics with one that is a favorite of mine, hearing about Raritan Valley Community College offering an online cannabis class. What's the scoop?
Okay, so our VCC is partnering with Valley Wellness to give New Jersey medical cannabis dispensary training course. Now, they've done this in the past at the school, but now they've integrated to online, which we've known something about for a long time. So I'm definitely glad that they were able to transition online. And the class starts June 1st and it runs through the 29th. Every Monday, 6 to 9 p.m. And the course is priced at $500.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And now are they going to get a certificate? What happens once you take in the course?
Well, once you take the course, you have a kind of like a stamp of certification of, hey, I've been educated within this space and I can work for cannabis dispensaries within the New Jersey market. I don't think it gives you ability to get slide pass and not get a card or register as a cannabis worker. And as you talk about the real science of cannabis during your high of the week, Dr. Monica Tang will be a leading expert on the endocannabinoid system, which she'll be debunking all these myths and misconceptions, outlining strategies for patient education and dispensary staff training on safety monitoring for New Jersey applicants. Now, this course, you do not have to be a student at RVCC, so that's pretty dope.
Yes. Okay.
And it's online, so, maybe someone from across the country is looking at moving to New Jersey and want to get in the cannabis industry. That's totally doable being online now.
That's awesome. I also would just want to quickly point out, shout out to Dr. Monica, who is part of the Doctors for Cannabis Regulation Board of Directors with myself. And she and I have done so many different speaking engagements together. She is a pharmacist, right? And she's been studying cannabis as science, as medicine for a long time. And she teaches other health professionals. So this is a rare treat for people to get that opportunity to learn from such a thought leader in the space as it pertains to cannabis medicine. The other thing I will say is, even though this is focused on New Jersey, let's not sleep. When you're learning from somebody like Dr. Monica, you might want to just utilize that time to learn, period. And it can be applicable in your state. Right. Now, some of the rules around New Jersey are just for New Jersey, but the endocannabinoid system is the endocannabinoid system, whether you're on the East Coast or the West Coast. So,
that's right.
Yes.
So we really, really want you guys to go out, learn more, join the course, and it's really exciting. And our second hot topic is also talking about the East Coast too.
Really?
Yes, okay. The East Coast is on green fire right now, and not in the virus terms. So New York City has released a press release saying that May 10th, 2020, they have eliminated pre-employment testing for cannabis.
Ooh, yes. So, if I had an applause button, we'd be hearing it on our audio.
LOL, yes, but it would be like silent baby claps to a certain extent because it's the city, not the state.
Okay,
so just a reminder for folks that may live upstate New York.
Or in Western New York. Shout out to Buffalo.
Right. And so this ending of prohibition with the pre-employment testing is a little bit of a game changer, but there's some loopholes.
Of course.
As far as if you are a current employee, you can still be tested for cannabis.
Gotcha.
Yes.
When I read that, I was like, okay, so they're it's a little bit, you can get past getting the job, but once you have a job, you can actually still be harassed for this. And I think that's going to need more work for sure.
Absolutely. So maybe when it becomes, more of a state law, that's something they could look into changing. And then for employees that they may feel like are under the influence or have brought the cannabis to work, you can still receive disciplinary actions. So, if they feel like, whatever they feel like you're high at work, you can get in trouble for that.
Now, by disciplinary actions, we're talking primarily within the company, right?
Yes.
Gotcha. The other thing that I worry about is that cannabis, as we've talked about in our previous episodes, because of the terpenes comes with such a strong smell, it's like that arbitrary line, and it's been demonized so long. And as we can see with social distancing, people take any reason to be a little bit racially discriminatory. So I can totally also see this being practiced in a way that isn't necessarily to the benefit of Black and brown folks. So I am hoping, and it's again, we put a lot of faith in human beings, but I'm hoping that by all these loopholes, the companies will not be doing things that will basically create more anxiety for their employees, especially as New York starts to roll out more adult use options. But really, I think they're going to be expanding the medical program. And New York has a lot of people who would qualify way more than that 100K as a state. And definitely New York City, I would hope that companies want to keep their employees.
Absolutely. So the exception to the pre-employment drug testing is the Department of Transportation.
Okay.
Law enforcement, CDLs, anyone supervising children and medical patients. And they're still finalizing rules and regulation for construction workers and aviation.
These make sense. I mean, at the end of the day, we always are concerned because, of course, we believe that so many people are going to just choose to go to work high or I would say
I know,
impaired.
right.
Impaired is more than high, because the truth of the matter is that, THC does what it does, but there are certain times where after you've been a user, or if you're consuming for a while and it's your medicine, that there isn't necessarily that same type of impairment. And so the assumption is, if you have my life in your hands, I don't want you to be impaired. And so hopefully they are looking at what the general rules are and not trying to tack on more. That's the other thing. I feel like with cannabis, we're always given a little bit more. They're like a little bit more stank on it. Like It's like alcohol plus some more jump in through hoops.
Right. Absolutely. But when New York moves, everybody on the East Coast moves just like that. So we're going to Virginia to really talk about Virginia lawmakers coming together to take a vote on ending pre-employment cannabis testing.
That's okay. So we did talk about Virginia just actually decriminalized, right?
Yes, and the governor signed the bill. There are a few amendments being made, but other than a couple, that criminalization bill is what it is. Mm-hmm. And so Councilwoman Stephanie Lynch, who also was one of the ones to introduce the decriminalization bill, is introducing another bill that ends the pre-employment. She feels like the decriminalization bill and the pre-employment marijuana testing kind of go hand in hand. And yes, and as they want to move to a more progressive cannabis state, she feels like this needs to be happening. This needs to be a measure. And in their bill, it also states that they want, their city officials to be able to use cannabis. Wow, or not cannabis to pre-test it.
And I wouldn't automatically assume to use, but because they're not trying to, of course, encourage it.
But if they have a medical card,
right? They want to, which is they do. They want to make sure that they're protecting. I feel like it's like a parent, right? Like when you have a teenager and they're starting to move and transition, and you're like, here's a condom, and you're like, you're not necessarily encouraging, but you do want to protect. And so I think in this case, that's smart. One of the things I found working with all of these municipalities is that people don't want to admit their own use or consumption, and they therefore automatically put that onto their employees as well. We, for a long time, assumed that while the city employees and the legislators may be putting this into action, they themselves have never consumed, or they themselves only did that back in the 60s and the 70s. And, it's one of those things where we have to, again, wipe away that shame that comes with being a person that consumes cannabis, however you're consuming it, medical or adult use. This is also really smart for Virginia, because we know the DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia area is shaping up to be a hub on the East Coast, right? Mm-hmm. DC has had great laws for a while, and now they're starting to transition to try to do real retail sales and real licensing in DC proper. Maryland has been in and out of court with a lot of the license applicants for the last 4 years, and they're still trying to figure it out. But at the end of the day, they do have dispensaries. Shout out to Hope Wiseman. The end of the day, if you're going to be in the DMV, and Virginia is in the DMV, you need to be able to compete, because people also live in Virginia and work in DC or Maryland, or they live in DC and Maryland, they work in Virginia. It's sort of like New York, New Jersey. Whichever one of those goes legal, the other one's gonna have to follow suit very quickly, because you're gonna see that demographic really they don't care. They go through the Holland Tunnel, right?
Well, they're getting their little money too, because they put tolls on all them highways.
Yes.
So I definitely agree. I just want to reiterate that it is not for cannabis usage. It is for pre-employment testing for cannabis. So they also could just test for other things too, but cannabis specifically, they'd be willing to take off.
That's good. That's good. And it's needed at this point. Yep.
Yeah. And so let's move to our hot topic number 4, because this is a little bit more federal and really moving our federal government to cannabis legalization, hopefully. Because the DEA is asking for comments. Now, we've, time and time before in previous episodes when different government agencies ask for our opinions and our comments. And so, the deadline is coming up May 22nd. So we really, really, really need you this week to put out your information to the DEA. And let's be clear here. The DEA currently has scientists be able to obtain cannabis, which is grown third party at the University of Mississippi. And it's overseen by the National Institute of Drug Abuse. And it's proposing new rules that would make that the sole agency in charge for research grade cannabis.
Well, okay, so let me just put this in perspective. Not too long ago, the DEA called for comments related to hemp regulations. We had over 4,000 people, which still to me is not enough. And now we're still in a very small number. I think it's under 100 people have actually submitted any type of comment. Again, you guys, this is happening whether we like it or not. It's so important that we come to the table when asked, because we need it on the record. If they're deciding to do something opposite, we need it on the record that X percentage of people came and said this certain comment. I don't believe that there should be one agency in charge of research grade cannabis. We found that the government doesn't necessarily share all of the details. They've had a patent since 1991 on cannabidiol or CBD. So we already know something within our government. They haven't shared it. They haven't changed the law as a result of it. But talking to Dr. Sue Sicily, who is one of the few cannabis doctors that is actually running a federally approved testing clinical trial, the weed is shitty.
Yeah, that's
other words. It's terrible.
I mean, that's
like
what
it's dust.
Right. That's what you hear all the time. Is that the cannabis that is being produced by these third party it does not feel like the cannabis you get when you even look online, you look on the internet. That cannabis does not look the same, are they purposely growing bad weed to get bad results? Those are the things that have to go into your mind, and not to mention, how are they growing it? America is home of GMO. So we grow our stuff very quickly in labs. So how are you growing this cannabis that is supposed to be tested scientifically for patients? That is really important to talk about. Organic cannabis has to be a form of the testing.
And I find it really funny that it's Mississippi. It's not like they said USC or University of Oregon.
Right.
Like, it's like you picked a state that still hasn't fully legalized. They don't know how to cultivate. I would hate to believe that they're purposely growing bad weed so that it can have bad results.
You hate to believe
I would
it,
hate
girl.
to believe it, but
it's
I just
hard
said what
to
I
believe
said.
it, not to believe it.
Somewhat. But here's the joke of it. Even with how terrible the cannabis is, Dr. Sue Sicily has said, she's testified, she's spoken so many times, it's still working. Right? Cannabinoids can still be obtained from this dusty, terrible weed. And that is what is actually really helpful at the end of the day. And she still says that smoking a joint for her patients is still some of the easiest and best way for her to help them.
Right.
So again, we are fighting. I feel like the reality of it is that cannabis is actually medicine and we need real science behind it.
Yes. Well, I think it's hard not to believe it, truth be told, because they've had lawsuits in the past about, scientists, cultivators asking to be a part of the program, asking to join as the growers of the cannabis, and hearing nothing. So let me tell you, since they want to ignore us when we want to join them, we are not going to let them get away with this policy change. So definitely click the link, go. Say your opinion. Even if you're copying whatever we said, caption by caption, just give your opinion, because we need them to know this is not okay. And we really want, the faster the scientists can come to a clear understanding of cannabis and have the good research, we'll be able to legalize, I feel, on a federal level.
With a foundation of cannabis as medicine and hopefully social justice in our mindset as we do regulate. I think that is important. So we got to make sure we leave our comments.
Oh,
too.
yes. I give my comments
today. I'll be doing that today. And I think it's okay to leave multiple comments. So don't limit yourself.
Right. You might
Share.
be Barbara somebody. Hello.
May 22nd, I didn't say make up a person. Don't limit yourself. They're going to hear from the WeedHead. But, just kidding. But May 22nd, again, is that deadline. So do not delay. Click the link. And yeah, I'm excited to learn more about what's going on in the cannabis industry throughout the United States. Again, this is what will help you also comment with clarity, comment with real information. So let's get into our deep dive.
Yes, so our deep dive series, we are taking a microscope and we're going to start at the top of the country, and that is Maine. A lot of people don't know this, but Maine legalized. And they've actually had medical marijuana since 1999.
Wow.
And in their program, and in their program, they allowed patients to grow their own plants. We talk about this all the time. Home grow is the way, like that's some spinach and lettuce in the back. They also had different cities like Portland and south of Portland in Maine decriminalized the possession of adult use cannabis in 2013 and 14.
Okay.
And so Maine legalized cannabis November 8, 2016 through a voting ballot. And
that was a lot of states that year, right? So Nevada also, just to get people, aligned with timing. We had a few states legalized in 2016. Massachusetts.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So we did have a few states that, looked into it, but it allowed for retail stores, manufacturing, production, distribution, and social clubs.
Okay.
Which is a big thing we talk about all the time. And this happened in the Act to legalize marijuana. So that you guys can look that up. I'm gonna leave the link just in case you want to look at the legislator. It's a lot of words. A lot of words.
Well, that's the one thing. Law is always a lot of words. So definitely bring your reading glasses. Be prepared to take a break. Come back to it, reread it, because oftentimes we will read something and we'll be like, wait, what did they say? So it's important. We will share those links, but it's, have discussion about it too.
Absolutely, especially for the states that haven't even moved into certain legalization. They've had their medical programs for a couple of years before they actually even implemented adult use. So there's something to that.
Right.
And their municipalities would be able to vote whether they wanted cannabis in the town or not. And they have over nearly 500.
Wow. So this, again, just to put everything in context as we deep dive into Maine, they actually are running a trajectory similar to California, right? California legalized medical use in 1996 as really the first to do that. And this is 1999 for medical use, then followed by decriminalization. 2016, California also legalized, right? Again, a lot of states came online in that time period. And so this is interesting because being from the East Coast, we've been in a lot of different markets, didn't realize that Maine was so progressive as it pertains to cannabis usage already. But let's get a little bit deeper and talk about what these rules say.
Yes, and we're going to talk about the type of progression they've had too.
Okay.
This 2016, when all this is happening, it's 2020, baby. So, we got to bring you guys up to the 2020 years. So in the bill, it said that the sales tax on the retail cannabis would be 10% only. They were not going to add any other crazy tax on top of that.
Okay.
So, and it went for social clubs as well.
Okay.
Their packaging would have to be, hard to open for a 5-year-old, but not for an adult. So that's something. And their product would not be able to be seen through the packaging. So you know how we grab our jars and we're like, well, where's the terpenes? You can't see that. And it must be reclosable as well. So
that's okay. Well, first of all, you can't see terpenes anyway. You smell them. You're funny, like, where the
trichome.
Yes. It's all good, but that's why, again, we know the science. We always are joking. I'm going to always correct you anyway and make sure that we're not telling information that doesn't make sense. But what doesn't make sense is the packaging piece. It's almost like there's still shame, right, related to cannabis so that we can't see it. Now, here's the thing. They're saving your cannabis, too, because light can deteriorate cannabis a bit. So it's better to keep it in a darker stored area. But it's not because of that's the reason why packaging is dark, if you ask me, right?
I do think so. But then again, they had home grow for so many years, so maybe they knew that necessarily seeing the trichomes is not as helpful when you're buying out of a big bulk.
That's true. That's true.
Versus having just a smell jar,
right,
and that is being seen. Their licensing fee would start at $250 and go all the way up to $2,500.
That's not bad. I mean, you said all the way up. There are states where the licensing fees start at $60,000 just to apply. Florida. Mm-hmm. And so, Maine isn't trying to gouge out, the small businesses who may want to be a part of this. That definitely piqued my interest. I said $250. Okay.
Well, the social clubs would be able to retail cannabis products, actual cannabis accessories, but they also had non-consumable products that would be able to be purchased as well.
Yeah, so that's like your apparel, any grocery store type stuff, soda, candy.
Yes.
But of course,
no cigarettes and no alcohol.
Here's the thing. I don't smoke cigarettes and I don't drink anymore. So I'm not necessarily and I know you're rolling your eyes, I'm not necessarily saying it has to be together, but this idea again that we're policing adults to that level, because alcohol and cigarettes go together in the bar. So I'm like,
depends on what state, not New York State.
That's true. Back in the day. So it's sort of one of those things where it's just like you automatically are saying, hey, y'all are not necessarily responsible enough to manage all three. I don't know about alcohol, but why wouldn't a social club be able to apply for a license for alcohol? Right. It's the same process you're applying. So, I think again, it's this idea of, is there another one hoop for the cannabis industry to jump?
Right. So I feel like to a certain extent, some of this stuff should be combined. Like at the end of the day, I've seen vape stores, like e-cigarette stores that are, they include the alcohol, but then in some states, their hookah lounges wouldn't be able to have alcohol. So, right. It is really just determines on the local government. But since this being voted, it's been a lot of drama. So in 2017, they quickly implemented parts of the law that would allow anyone over 21 to grow up to 6 mature plants and possess 2.5 ounces of cannabis.
Well, okay. So basically they were saying they don't have a retail program yet. So they're like, grow your own. See, this is funny. I don't want to go all the way shade. I always look at okay, well, what are they allowing? 2.5 ounces isn't necessarily terrible. Again, an ounce is 28 grams. It's so important for people to understand the science behind it. And I think legislators often don't when they come up with this. They just know what song or what they think is a lot. So that's interesting. The plant thing is also interesting because your yield really depends on what type of cultivator you are. You could do a lot with 1 plant, 2 plant, right? But you could also do nothing with 6, right? So it depends on how well you do know what you're doing.
Well, I think also when they say, I think it's 2.5 ounces on the person at once.
Gotcha.
So
that makes sense.
If you were stopped, not that, they didn't put a limit on how big your 6 plants had to be or the yields. They were just like, listen, when you travel in these streets, homie, you can only have 2 ounces on your sorry. So, I kind of could understand that a little bit more. I'm glad they didn't put a limit on the growing of the plants. That was really smart.
That was smart. And I'm glad that they allowed home grow. So basically right now, if you're in Maine, you should theoretically be able to grow your own if you're 21 and over.
Yes.
Okay.
And right. And in 2019, the Governor Mills actually signed the framework for adult use. So this happened in 2017. So now it's 2019, and they're finally, getting a little bit more action up there. And in this framework, it forces the adult use license to have license applications to be residents of Maine, and they had to do it for more than 4 years or more, and they have to have at least 50% of the ownership. Cannabis products will have a universal symbol, and they also made an amendment to the Maine food law that no longer considered edibles produced with recreational marijuana adulterated.
Okay, so, all right, first let's just go back because we're doing a deep dive. So it's important for people to understand the timing and action, because we get a lot of folks that get real excited once things get legalized and then they fall off, or they don't realize how long it's taking. 2016, we had states like Massachusetts, we had states like California, we had states like Maine legalize, and now we have moved through a trajectory of, okay, we know we're not going to open retail stores fast enough, so we have an interim. 2017, you can grow your own. 2019 is finally a framework, which means how will we regulate it? How will we execute this adult use? That, by the way, is a whole year after California had already opened their adult use market, right? And Massachusetts had already opened their adult use market. So Maine is lagging behind if we compare them to the others that went that year. Now, granted, we see a lot of mistakes in Massachusetts and California. So I'm not saying that they're wrong to not have done this in a stepwise. In fact, they may be a little bit brighter than the rest of us.
I mean, listen, they on the top of the country, so they had to start. They're also, Maine, isn't it like kind of close to Canada?
It is.
So, they're dealing with that legalization as well.
Yeah, I mean, so is New York. I don't necessarily make us smarter, but I agree that they weren't looking at what everybody else was doing and rushing. Right. A lot of people looked at California and they were like, oh, we got to get to. A lot of people were looking at Massachusetts and we got to get to. One thing I will say that I can appreciate here is the stepwise way in which they looked at the market, and starting with the fact that you can grow your own, as opposed to what has happened in a lot of markets, this idea of home grow being stomped out because somehow that is the root of the illegal market. It's not, by the way, but that was smart. It's like, okay, we can't provide it for you, but we can make sure that you have at least a provision that you're not going to get in trouble if this is what you do. Now, I am not in love with some of the rules that they created for 2019, but I will say right now they're definitely got one of the lowest taxes that I've seen. It's not multi-layered taxes. You try to decipher California taxes.
Your receipt is long.
It's very long. Illinois, your taxes is like, but let's be real, those states already had taxation in a high rate, and Maine is one of those that is same. It's like you do the bed and breakfast there, and you look at your receipt, you're like, that's all that. Okay, I'll take it.
I'm not gonna argue with the receipt,
right? But this is true to Maine, so I like that. But I don't love the fact that there's such limitations on how you're going to get your license. Maybe they realize that with 2,500 they get a flock of everybody coming in.
Right, which is part of it. Some states are not pro big corporation. So with their taxing the ability to home grow from medical and then, transitioning it into the adult use, really spoke about how, they want their people to figure out, I'm not surprised if somebody got a brewery in the back of their garage.
Oh my God. In Maine, they probably do have brewery, to be honest.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. They're like, listen, you're going to make your own beer.
Yes. It's like, that's what we do at the house. Is that the bed and breakfast? We're going to make our own beer, get our own maple syrup. Right.
Okay.
And get our own cannabis.
Okay.
I'll sign up for that.
Right. Hey, I'm all here, team home grow for life. Grow your own. My mom always had a big garden when I was growing up, every spring putting out flowers, planting seeds. So it's a big deal for people to understand that cannabis is a plant.
It's a plant.
You don't even, we look at Instagram, it's all these fancy lights, it's in this beautiful building, it's all these fans, but not for nothing. If you throw that seed in the ground, it's still gonna grow. Now it might be a male plant, it might be a female plant, hermaphrodite, whatever, that thing's still gonna grow with the sun. You know what I'm saying?
Have you been taking my online course?
I may have broke your online course.
Shout out to the WeedHead and Company.
Right.
I love it.
And company. So, we also learned that the Maine's municipalities are very slow to opt in for adult use cannabis. Yep. And so far, the reports are really kind of hard to find how many cities opted in. Mm-hmm. But right now, in July of 2019, they were saying only 15 had said yes, and others are coming, but they're slow to roll.
Wow. So out of 500, only 15. Did the math on that. That's only 3%, y'all. That's worse than California, which California only about 28, 29, maybe 30% really initially opted in. And now it's maybe close to 40, but it's still more than 60% opted out. And we have a lot of dry spots in California as a result. That rule is very problematic. It's almost like you guys, we're voting it in, which is what Maine did, by a vote ballot. And then when it comes down to the municipalities, all of a sudden now everybody disagrees, not in my backyard. I think that's in large part because the legislators that represent those municipalities are not necessarily in agreement. They got enough people in their ear to get the right lobbyists in your ear saying no, 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 and you think now that's the heart of the people. This is why it's so important to speak up, show up for your city council meetings.
I know that's right.
And make sure that you let people know what you believe.
Especially now that they online, honey, you could just be on that Zoom meeting. You got your leaders speaking, and you could be on that Zoom meeting doing your other work, but they see that you agree. So, raise your hand, high five, wave at them, So,
emoji.
LOL, right? So, in 2019, November, they started receiving their adult use applications, and there were a lot of reports saying that in spring of 2020, the first adult use retail sale will happen.
Ooh, but of course,
shout out to COVID.
Stop, not shout out, but unfortunately, the COVID.
Well, I mean, it does feel like shout out to COVID as much as we talk about COVID. And, it's kind of sad because a lot of things haven't been able to move in the way that we plan them. And people who, like me, like you, really live and die by our schedules to a certain extent. It could hurt you, and it could hurt your pockets. Not for nothing, you're already in debt when you open up. So to be able to keep pushing it back is going to be hard. We also found out that Maine social clubs won't be opened until 2023. They're still working on that framework. They're still putting together things, making different amendments. So
I find it so funny because it's like, what we need to think about related to the social club that much, other than how you're going to make money off of it, right? Mm-hmm. The reality is that when somebody is invited to someone's house and they're having a sesh at their house, that's a social experience, a social consumption experience. They basically made a club out of their house. So we're doing a lot of these things naturally in the legacy market. And if we just stop trying to reinvent the wheel, act like we're smarter than the market that's been around for decades, right? And start getting insights from that market, I think we'll be so much better shape. It's sad that basically, it's legal. You can grow your own, you can have it. You can't really get together and consume it, which is definitely part of the culture. You wouldn't be able to have a high times really in Maine, right?
Not right now.
Not right now. And there's a need for us to understand maybe that should have been dealt with before some of the retail aspect, because technically you're already growing it. So you already have it. Social clubs are been around even when there's no real laws on the books. Look at Spain. When we go into Cannabis, all of the social clubs, they don't have an official law on the books. It's decriminalized and you can't smoke in public, but they have all these clubs and they're all in business. I think the states are really trying to figure out how to make money off of it. Of course, really be like white on rice, wanting to control every aspect. They're like, 2+ per person. Like, no. It's too much for me. It actually is frustrating because I feel like if they follow this trajectory and they're thinking about it, they should really be pushing social clubs open now. Or not necessarily now because of COVID, obviously, but earlier than.
Can't share no blunt no more.
No, please. But in fact, that's where we can retrain people in a social club setting, right? Instead, now I got to have a little bit of a fake Tupperware party, invite my girls over and be like, this, everybody get their own joint, everybody get their own pipe, and
Right.
This is how you do this. But these environments are being stifled, in my opinion.
Well, they are. And, you know, when you go back to the original bill, you know, it says that, I think the reason why it's so hard is because they kind of did it like alcohol. When you go to a bar, you can't bring in your, even though some people sneak their alcohol in, you know, you're not allowed to bring your alcohol into the club and you're not allowed to take it out. And you're supposed to purchase it there and consume it there. That's what they wrote in the bill. It's kind of hard to police cannabis to do that. One, because unless you're going to check me when I go in and when I go out, you don't know. And for some people, microdosing is a thing. Some people, yeah, they'll smoke the whole thing right there. But some people like, listen, this was $50. We're going to figure out how to get this out and use it other places. So I think that because they did that bill and they're trying to like compare it, but then they won't let it be in a bar or let a bar be a part of it. They're definitely having to figure out the logistics a lot longer.
In some ways, I understand the simplicity of a framework, and alcohol has a regulatory framework that we can follow. And so it's constantly being referenced. It's constantly being mirrored and comped and whatever word you want to use when you're developing strategic planning. And I get that, but that's a starting point. At the end of the day, cannabis still is medicine first. And so just thinking about your patients only, Maine has over 60,000 patients.
Mm-hmm.
This is, you know, an opportunity for them to get into an environment and be able to consume as they want with other patients and keep it a bit social. I think that they're trying to control too much. This idea that you use what you buy right there works for alcohol because, like you said, there is an element of the inebriation. All of that happens. If I buy $50, I buy an 8 for $50 at a social lounge. I will have to be like, is this a 24-hour lounge? Because I need to be there for a while before I'm done, or have a lot of friends with me to help me share this age. Maybe not just one, you. But me, my microdosing one-hit wonder self would be like, dang, now I'm stuck. I got to sit here forever. Now, the only thing I can say as a business idea that works for me is if we're making open, like office space that are also consumption spaces. That's an idea. I talk about it in my book. But basically, that allows me to come in at 7 o'clock in the morning. I can buy an 8. And if I don't leave till 7 p.m., I did a work day and I had an 8 there, and I can see myself over
like your
the
cup
time.
Of coffee.
I probably still would wind up leaving some, though. Real talk, just the way I
Yeah, because you follow the rules. I'm putting that thing in my purse like the biscuits to go. No, I'm not throwing it. You crazy.
I think also because it's a plant, and with alcohol, we've got different bottles and things that people can bring and try to sneak or whatever. But a plant does make it more difficult that you don't know if this is my bud or the bud that I picked up from the actual spot. So that's the interesting thing. It's just like, be realistic about consumption as it is, and I think our rules would make way more sense.
Yes.
So okay, so the final verdict on Maine, because
wait. We actually just dropped this past week that Maine did do an amendment to the residency requirement for the adult use marijuana businesses.
Wow. Okay.
Yes. So there were a lot of, associations being together and joining in and being like, listen, we want to be able to afford to come afloat, but it won't happen if you limit our access by having only our residency. It's hard to get fundraising just for people in Maine. And the more money the outside party brings in, the more ownership the person has to give up.
Yes.
So it had to be, it had to be symbiotic to a certain extent.
I think that was somewhat smart. I'm a little scared though. So it's like, we let the floodgates open. So part of it is Maine thinking, okay, if we want our market to be successful, we may want to have the big brands that are already established in other markets. I will caution and say those big brands have also burnt some bridges too. And so you will also find that people like myself, we're well traveled around the country in terms of cannabis brands and usage. I may not even mess with your market because that's all you have. So you want to make sure you're going to just be smart about who and what. And then I think that balance on having people who are still local be part of the leadership team, seeing that requirement in play too, because very quickly you're going to get those big old companies coming in and they have no ties other than they want to distribute there, and they don't really have any interest in growing Maine, if you will. And there's a lot of states, municipalities, Buffalo was very similar, where you're trying to revitalize. You don't necessarily just want people from the outside who really have no stake.
Right.
They have no interest in staying beyond their endeavor. And if it's successful, it works. And if it doesn't, oh well. And I think that that's a difference in homegrown. I also really believe that Maine has that environment, like you said, where somebody can have their brewery, they could be growing, their own cannabis. It's very craft central, and I can see craft fairs being there. Some of these really interesting exotic strains potentially being grown there. I think they have an ability to fit that niche too, and that will go away when you have a lot of big brands. Before we close out this deep dive, I feel it's so important that we grade some of these states. We all love homeschoolers, so we're going to do a grade. And so I just wanted to get your thoughts on, like, based on the trajectory and what is happening and where they are, where would you grade Maine as far as not just adult use, but cannabis legalization overall? We didn't talk about their hemp, but we only got an hour show. But like cannabis legalization overall, where would you grade them?
Ooh, on a scale of
A, B, C, D, E, F, right?
Okay. I would give them a B minus.
Okay.
Yes, because one, if I have to, as we go more into this deep dive series, we're going to learn more and more about different states and their legalizations and regulations. Overall, even my knowledge of the cannabis industry, it is probably in the top. It's only 11 states too, you know, so it's in the top, but it's not like A+ work or A- work, it's like an 80. You're giving us 80%. And it's because they allowed the homegrown into their market. That is what really is a big deal for me, especially as we talked about in past, different associations in different states getting together and being like, no homegrown. And it's like, it's the plant, bro.
Right. I agree with you about your assessment. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend some time thinking about a rubric so that, of course, I'm fair across the board. You know me, but I probably would give them a C+. So we're close. We're only like a half a grade different. With C being average, right? And average being like, okay, your bare minimum bones understand that, you can't overtax the situation. Consumers don't want to be stressed out when they're there. And they're like, I bought $40 worth of cannabis, but I'm spending $100. How did this happen? Right. You know what I mean? You also don't want to rush the market and allowing consumers to grow and learn about cannabis. I still didn't see much about social justice. Okay. I didn't see much about
how many socially justice things that's happening in Maine.
A lot. People of color are everywhere. And those are the states where we have real disproportions. So you look at states like New York, where you're 4 times as likely to be arrested if you're a person of color related to cannabis prohibition. Whereas Maine and places like Washington, we're like, where the black people at? Well, guess what? They're in jail because it's 8 times as likely, right? It's unfortunate, but in those cases, we have it more pronounced. Because we are a rare thing to be seen. Look at our experience in Wisconsin. It was just Native Americans and white people, and basically our all-black team got targeted over a smell, and we weren't even part of it. So it's one of those things where you get targeted more because you stick out like a sore thumb, but there is a black and brown community in Maine. I'm sure of it. We have a diverse country, and I didn't see any of that. And so it'd be hard for me to give anybody a B or higher if you're not talking about any of the social justice implications. What are you doing doing with that 10% tax? How are you taking that revenue and putting it back? So we didn't talk about it because it wasn't really there. It's not written into the law.
It is some things written into the law, but kind of like most states, it is, okay, we're going to give it to, education, and then the rest is going to be figured out along the lines. But most of it's just going to education for kids, not even for law enforcement or the fire department or medical programs. It is mainly just the children.
They want to prevent. I get it. And they should do kids. But to your point, nobody wants to spell it out because nobody wants to say that we did this jacked up and we need to equally basically lean in to unjack it up. And that to me doesn't take, we got to see as we go. We already know that that's what happened because the history books tell us and the numbers tell us. So we need to correct that first. But nonetheless, they're still homegrown, like you said. They still stepwise. I love that they came out the gate with the social consumption because honestly, that is something that a lot of states had to go back on because they wanted to say no from the beginning. Nevada opened and they like no social consumption. What? We can't consume.
Meanwhile, everybody's smoking a motherfucking cigarette.
Yes. in the casino. So,
in your face, like.
Okay. Like, but they also soon realized that if you can't be in the casino, you can't be in the hotels, you can't be on the strip, then where are you going to be? In an Airbnb that is consumption friendly, probably private property, but they have.
And they got weird rules on those too.
Yes. So they have shot themselves in the foot. So again, they're not below average. I give them that C+ for being above average, but they haven't even gotten their market started. They still have a limited number of caregivers and medical people who are talking and giving out certification in cannabis. About 60,000 plus patients. So, I mean, New York only got 100K. So if you look at that, that actually, gives them a little bit more points for me. But I think that they could do more, and I'm going to continue to watch. But that 250, y'all, don't sleep on only $2,500 for a licensing fee. Right. Don't sleep on the fact that they've changed the residency. I would.
You might want to live in Maine. You never know after a little bit. So how much they houses? Who got houses for 50 cents? So I mean, I can agree with what you're saying. Definitely the social equity piece. I do think we do have to give a little rubric on it because now I'm like, wait, what are we scoring? Because I was like, dang, I didn't even think of that. I was so excited for home grow because as we'll learn, a lot of places have eliminated it. And once you eliminate it, it is hard for me to even be like, pretending to like your market, truth be told.
Listen, I'm the same way because I know certain strains work best for my ailments. It sucks to have to go to a market and recognize that market won't even let me grow the strain that I know works for me, and just because they want to have all the popular strains.
Right. All those articles, man, get out of here. So I think that overall, I can't wait to see Maine come online. Once they come online, I do think we're going to have to make a trip out there.
Absolutely.
During the summer, so next year, because it's probably cold as the dickens during the winter.
That's true. That's where my summer house is going to be.
Okay. Don't do the cold like that. No, but I'm very curious. I'm definitely wanting to see what their social club rollout is going to look like in the upcoming years and what they do for fun until then. So hopefully you guys really enjoyed our deep dive series, and give them any takeaways. How can they implement this in their market?
Well, the biggest takeaways I would say is be an advocate in your market. Number one, join these groups that are already advocating. Do not let the law get put in place without you having a say. Just because you go to your city hall to be an advocate does not automatically make you a user. That's the first thing. The second thing is don't be afraid to look at other states. This whole deep dive into Maine has got me thinking bed and breakfast honey, bud and breakfast honey. Okay, as social consumption. I mean, and if it's not open until 2023, we have more than enough time to scope out, find some partners that are on the ground, and let's get into it. So I definitely think, if anything, the biggest takeaway is don't sleep on these states that aren't as exciting, right? Everybody talks about New York, even though New York may be 2-3 more years away from legalization, especially now being at the center of this entire pandemic. Basically, this is like Oklahoma for hemp, in my opinion. Tremendous opportunity if you're willing to take that on, if you're willing to take that risk of putting your business somewhere maybe that you're not. We're a global world, and so that's the way I think about Maine right now. I'm very excited. I'm gonna do some research.
Yeah.
Never know. Just got the wheels turning.
I know. Well, I think I'm an inventor in my mind. So I'm all here for it. And thank you guys for joining us. If you guys have any questions, let us know. Leave us comments. We'll try to answer it our next one. We're so excited for next week. We have a guest coming on.
Oh, yes. And of course, if you have a
up in these next couple of weeks. We can't wait to tell you guys. It's so exciting.
Exciting. But of course, you can always find us at theweedhead.com. Please make sure you like and subscribe to our different channels that we got going on. And what about She Blaze, honey?
Well, you can watch us live on Facebook Saturday mornings and listen to us anytime on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio.
All right. Well, I think we're out.
Yes.
Have a good one. Enjoy your week.